Hey guys, Brett Weiss here. Welcome to another video. Somehow, someway, Adam Koralik has talked me into taking him once again to some Dallas-Fort Worth locations for filming on his channel. But, you know, it's all good. I have a good time doing it. And he has very gracefully, that's not really the word. He has very graciously.
I was a producer in another life.
And I'm a writer. I'm supposed to know these words. He's very graciously agreed to appear on my channel, which is very cool. And we're talking about, what are we talking about today?
So you wanted us to make a video in which we were going to talk about, there's actually an evolution of this.
Indeed.
It was initially a couple of random questions like, what was your favorite this and that? Then we boiled it all the way down to like, what's your top 5 favorite games that were, you know, ever not on a Sega console? And I was like, well, that's too much because Sega stopped making consoles effectively 20 plus years ago.
Right.
So that's, you know, any game after that. Then it became, okay, something that wasn't on a Sega console that was relevant while Sega was making hardware. Right. And then I realized most of my choices were Nintendo based. And then I was like, that's not really fair because where's all the PlayStation stuff, which of course there would have been examples of. So to narrow it down to truly 5, we have gone with top 5 Nintendo produced games that you wish were on Sega hardware. And we're saying this with the fantasy that we know that IPs are a thing and this is legally impossible, etc. This is just Thanos magic reality stone. I want these 5 games on my system.
Yeah, all highly unlikely and pretty much impossible.
I would say impossible.
But that's the fun of this, is just, you know, living in a dream world. So anyway, let's get to it. Adam Koralik's top 5 games that he wish would have been on a Sega console.
Nintendo
games. Nintendo specifically. Let's get to it, guys. Do we have anything else?
Top 5 Nintendo games I wish had been on a Sega console.
That's it. All right, let's get to it. All right, let's get to it. We're not really going in any order here, just the top. But you do have 5 specific titles that you absolutely love, and that it'd be so cool to have them on a Sega title.
I agree. So here, I will still just, like he said, no particular order. The only order I will throw to these is just basically generational.
Right.
So we're going to start with a couple of Super Nintendo games that in a magical fantasy world would have been awesome if they somehow appeared on the Genesis, regardless of, again, legalese, technological capability, doesn't matter, would have been cool.
Right.
Number 1 on that list, Super Mario World.
All-time classic.
Super Mario World is actually one of my favorite video games of all time. It is probably my single favorite game on Nintendo hardware in general. It is actually, fun fact, the first video game I ever played.
Oh.
In any capacity.
Really?
Yes. So when I was a child, the system had come out in, I think it was like 91.
91.
And in the Thanksgiving of 92, so for the Europeans watching, that would be in November. Basically, at that time, my cousins had managed to get a Super Nintendo. And I was like, you know, what is this thing? I'd only seen a video game once before, but I was too young to play it. It was Paperboy. It was actually the first game I ever saw.
At somebody's house?
No, at my house. My cousins all came over with an NES, and you can't play it because you're too little.
Right.
But anyway, so I went to their house for Thanksgiving. I'm a couple years older.
Yeah.
All right. They have the Super Nintendo.
Right.
They have Super Mario World set up. And they decided that you can try it.
Same cousins.
Same cousins. They were older,
you
too.
sort of graduated.
I graduated from being, you know, 3 to being 5. You know, like, it's just, you can maybe hold the controller without throwing it. You know what I mean? Like, what else? Or drooling on it. Like, whatever they think is going to happen. Anyway, they handed me the controller.
Right.
And so I played that first level. Like, the absolute first level of that game, where you're supposed to run, you jump on the first Goomba, you go on top of the thing, knock over the shells, whatever. And I immediately just ran into the first Goomba.
Sure.
And, you know, I cried.
That was my experience with Super Mario Brothers. You didn't just play it. What is this game? This is incredible. This is great. And then you just run into Goomba and die.
But I didn't know how to run, so of course he's slowly walking to death.
Right.
But, you know, I played it every time, same exact thing. I couldn't figure out that I had to jump over this thing because I was a stupid little kid, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was hooked on the entire idea. And, of course, when I was a little older and actually had the game myself a few years later, I played the crap out of it.
Awesome.
So yeah, it is one of my all-time favorites.
Such an epic title. And guys, I'm going to show you this real quick. So my copy of Super Mario World came with the console, as you might suspect. And so I made this little, just threw it together, this little case, which is silly. And look at the back. See where it says Captain Cartridge rates the video games 4 stars? Now, I was in the 90s, I was writing a book called Captain Cartridge Rates the Games. And I thought I would be cool like Roger Ebert with a 4-star system. Most critics go with like a 5-star or 10-star or whatever. Roger Ebert went with 4 stars. That was his highest grade. And I thought, you know, he was one of my sort of inspiration. Heroes growing up. Roger Ebert, I mean, one of the greatest movie reviewers ever. It's had the 4-star rating, so it does have a perfect grade. The book was never published because I could not find a publisher, but anyway, there's that.
Roger Ebert from Chicago, my town.
Indeed, very true.
He loves our pizza.
So anyway, there you go. There's my faux CIB copy of Super Mario World.
You do love our pizza.
I do love Chicago pizza, but
I'm not misrepresenting.
But we were talking about Game On Expo earlier today.
Phoenix.
Yes, and believe it or not, some of the best pizza I've ever had in my life was in Phoenix. And John Lester recommended it.
He's a good guy. If you're watching, John, you're awesome.
They've got wood-fired stoves in the dining room there. Just exquisite.
I might be able to explain that one.
Yeah.
Phoenix is often referred to as Chicago South because all our snowbirds.
This is very much an independent restaurant.
I'm just saying it might be Chicago family that all went down there and built.
Entirely possible. All right, what's next?
Okay, continuing with the Super Nintendo.
Yes.
My second favorite game on that system, Donkey Kong Country 2.
Yes.
Not the first one.
The best of the three.
Exactly. Not the third one. So I love this game. I remember renting this as a kid from Blockbuster. Loved it, played a ton of it, and I wanted it really bad. And this is, you're a kid and you're a little spoiled, whatever. I remember, I love this game so much, we just kept re-renting it.
Yeah.
Eventually my mom's like, I better just get on this game rather than do it. But she came home with Donkey Kong Country 1.
Which is a great game.
And I cried.
You cried, right?
I was like, it felt like, from what I remember, I felt like you don't even know who I am. It just felt like. So she was like,
well, I've heard worse stories about a kid wanting a cool action game, and they end up getting some educational or religious game.
Like the Simpsons.
At least it wasn't that bad.
Like in the Simpsons thing, instead of getting blood, whatever, he gets the golf game. No, it wasn't like that. And she was like, oh my bad. So we went back to Toys R Us, returned it. So it was all good. So I got my Donkey Kong Country 2.
Right.
That game is amazing. Yes. I've only beat it, not on cartridge form though, because most of it I've beaten. But then if there's that, if you played it enough, there's that extra area where everything's super impossibly hard. I could never do it on the actual hardware. I beat it through emulation, playing the game on an OG Xbox. Yeah. I admit it, I did that, but it was the only one.
Hey, that's all right.
To 100 it. At least I just didn't have the talent. Still don't.
Right.
I'm sorry to say.
Well, as a lot of you guys know that my wife and I used to play Street Fighter 2 Turbo when we were dating, and that caused severe problems because it was tense, and we started hating each other in real life too. We got so competitive with Street Fighter 2 Turbo that it affected our real life relationship, and so we switched over to the original Donkey Kong Country where we could cooperate and take turns and all that stuff and work together to beat the game. And that carried over to Donkey Kong Country 2, another incredible game. Never really warmed up to Donkey Kong. Now, Donkey Kong Country 3 is epic, it's incredible and all that stuff, but I just never warmed up to it. It doesn't have the same feel as the first two for whatever reason.
I don't know what it is. So the third one is, correct me if I'm wrong, is just where Dixie Kong and Junior Kong in there, right? I hadn't played it in so long.
Right.
Because the second one, part of what makes the second one so great is, ironically, you don't play as Donkey Kong. You have a goal, is to save Donkey Kong, and you're playing as Diddy and you're playing as Dixie, and Dixie could do that helicopter twirl thing, and it worked really well. This is which one? So you have she's obviously there, and then you have Junior, and I think the whole idea, and it's been so long since I played this one, but if I remember correctly, you don't ever really play as Diddy, and I think you're looking for both Diddy and Donkey Kong.
The kiddos take over.
I think it's been. Second one's obviously my favorite for a reason. That's the one I can.
Diddy's Conquest is so freaking amazing.
It's also got a great game. Yeah, because it's also it messes with you. Most people say Diddy's Kong.
Diddy Kong's Quest,
but it's actually Diddy's Conquest.
Yeah,
and that's got multiple meanings.
Yeah,
because if you say it fast, Conquest sounds like conquest.
Yes, very clever of them.
But they're British. So they're good. They're good with the language.
Yes, they
invented it. We firmware updated it. Oh, shots fired!
Right.
Anyway.
All right. What do we got next?
Right. We'll move on to the next generation here. The N64.
Yes.
So these are in no particular order. We will go with Star Fox 64. Yeah. So Star Fox 64. I was not a fan of Star Fox on the SNES, which I believe you have over there.
Yes.
I just the first time I played, even as a kid, when I first saw that, I was like, I don't really like the look of this.
Yeah.
It just wasn't fun. But Star Fox 64, I remember being at a friend's house. And this is an old promo video that exists out there. You can probably find it on YouTube somewhere. They were promoting Star Fox 64 in a way where a Nintendo representative had been kidnapped by what was clearly supposed to be Sonic and Crash Bandicoot.
Right.
So it's like Sony and Sega were like, we're gonna stop Mario. You know, it was like this weird video, and the guy who was basically representing Nintendo was like, you can't stop us. Look what we're working on, because he holds them hostage. They want to know what their top secret thing is, and it's gonna be Star Fox 64.
Right.
And they show this footage of like how it's got, you know, graphics that'll blow your mind. But the big thing, of course, was the rumble feature. So we're watching this video at my friend's house, and we were both like, oh my God, you know, when we're like 12, you know, or whatever it was. Sorry about that. And so we're just like, so excited about this thing.
Yeah.
And then we actually played it, and it's like legitimately a really good game.
Yes.
And I feel like it is, to this day, probably still the best Star Fox game ever made.
It's my favorite.
I mean, there might be people that would argue with that, but, you know, I love it. What can I tell you? And it's got very strong memories for that game.
Well, I had a similar reaction to you when I played Star Fox on the Super Nintendo. I thought, you know, this is supposed to be advanced, and I'm supposed to like it, and it's got these like cutting edge Super FX graphics or whatever. Don't really like the way it looks. It's just jagged and
Prototyping.
Yeah, I still like
Proof
the
of concept.
raster graphics, the traditional graphics, and it just didn't look that great. And it didn't feel that great. I preferred like a side-scrolling shooter like Gradius 3 or something like that, or you know, even Super R-Type with all the slowdown and everything. I just didn't vibe with it that much, but man, Star Fox 64 is amazing. And I like the difficulty level because it's not super hard. Like a lot of the like the side scrollers or vertical scrolling shooters are so freaking difficult. You got the bullet hell and all this, and impossible to beat without continuing a million times, or you can't beat them ever. Star Fox 64 is very beatable, very playable, just sort of a user-friendly game, a casual-friendly, hardcore-friendly. It's just a great game.
I agree with that, because the other thing that game kind of, I'm not gonna say it introduced this, but at least it did to us, was, so instead of being like your simple narrative of like go to each level until you finish, it had multiple paths.
Yeah.
And based on little things you did, the trajectory you would take to eventually get to the end to fight Andross would be different. And if you were good enough and you did the hardest route, you'd have the harder version of Andross at the very end. So it kept you coming back, because you're like, I wanted to figure out like which level is it where you have to save Slippy, etc., or which one is the one where Falco, if you don't do what he says, you know, you end up with a different path. Like those little things that I remember having to read out of like Brady game strategy guide and stuff like that. And this should go without saying with all these games. I guess one thing I'll add to this as a general criteria: every single one of these 5 games is a game that I now, even at the age of 37, almost 38 by the time maybe some of you see this. Yeah, I know, I'm dead. I'm mostly dead, if you think about it.
I'm 2 decades older than him.
I'm nearly 38% of the way to being Jimmy Carter. So anyway, it goes without saying that any one of these games is one that, even at that age, I can just pick up, play, and continue. It's not a game where you enjoyed it that one time, and you go back and like, this isn't as good as I remember, or like, I had my fun. These, we could pop them in tonight after this is done recording, and I'm gonna crush it.
They just go down so easy.
Yeah.
You mentioned the characters in Star Fox 64. This was one of the few shooters really that has characters that you care about and that are kind of cute and interesting and fun to interact with. Not that many shooters you care about the characters, so yeah.
Do a barrel roll.
Another plus about the
characters
game.
talk, which believe it or not, was a big deal at the time.
Especially for a shooter.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right.
All right, moving on.
Getting down to the
2 more. Dos más.
2 more?
Yeah, that was 3.
Let's see. 1,
2 more.
2, 3. You are right. Your math
I
is
know
good.
math.
You
I
do
went
math
to
good.
I go to the kindergartens. Okay, so the 4th one,
Yes.
which was no longer going to be represented here because he doesn't have them, sadly. So
There's a reason for that.
So the next one, which will not be represented physically, just by a stock photo, because homie doesn't have it, oddly enough. GoldenEye for the N64.
Right.
GoldenEye to me is, I know people are like, oh, it aged like milk, I hate the controls. I can still play it. I remember how to do it. It was never hard, and it still isn't. People are telling me like, you can't enjoy it now. You're not allowed to. If you try, you'll hate it because the controller is bad. I know, because I'm a Gen Zer. I didn't grow up with it, but this is the kind of stupid comments I get on YouTube about dumb stuff like this. I still love it. I can play that game anytime. No
I think
problem.
it holds up.
It holds up great to me.
Yeah.
It does. The N64 visually didn't, as far as like you know,
Right.
trying to display it on a modern television, but that's a different story entirely. But when you get past that problem, that game to me still remains like the GOAT as far as like playability, replayability. Like I was genuinely, passionately excited when like that Xbox 360 rebuild prototype dumped. I was really happy when they did the official re-release, even though it was basically just an emulated port.
Right.
You know, I was able to check that version out. I crushed it. I got, you know, Secret Agent. I'm really good at that game.
Right.
And I love that game. And, you know, you get the secret levels and everything. And just the amount of fun you could have. That was one of those games when I was at that age where everybody had that one. Mm-hmm. And everybody was talking about that one. And you're at the right age where, like, there's just enough truth to what you're saying where people believe you, but you can also make stuff up and people believe that too. So it'd be like, there was a Donkey Kong mode in that game, speaking of Donkey Kong, because that was also made by Rare. So that was true. Like, it would basically make the characters look like big apes.
Right, yeah.
However, you know, people would also be like, well, you know, there's also a Mario mode. It's just, my cousin heard about it and you had to do this, but like, it gives you a red hat and then like all these like made up things. I'm like, whoa, his cousin did it. Like, you don't know, unverified, you know. But that was just one of those games where everybody knew that game really well. And everywhere you went to some party somewhere, everybody had it.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I remember one time when I was a kid, my mom had us go to like one of her friends' house, you know, like, then when you're a kid at that age and your parents want to go have a fun time with other parents, they put you in that basement with just all the other kids. Like, these are other kids, do things.
Right.
Go to one of those, and I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I brought my Game Shark with me for the N64. Don't know why I did it, but I did. And we went there, and these kids were playing GoldenEye the second we walked in the door. And they're all like frustrated because they want to unlock some of the secrets and all that stuff, and they can't do it. And it was like straight up like a 90s commercial. I was like, well.
Right.
And so they're like, no, that doesn't work. You can't put on invincibility. It doesn't count. I'm like, trust me. And so then we put on the gold, you know, we put it in the N64, and Game Shark, it runs, and they're like, it's not gonna work, dude. And so I'm invincible, and they're just, okay. And then you get to the end, and it unlocked, and they were like,
you're a hero for the day.
I was a hero. I was a hero to these kids I did not know.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, so point is, I got stories from that game for days. I love that game.
That's awesome. Well, it was a huge rental title back in the day for parties, for sleepovers, for all that stuff. And, you know, at this point, I was too old to have sleepovers at friends' houses, but
then what am I doing here?
This is just
really
utilitarian, the fact that you're staying here.
See. That's all. We're not allowed to be friends anymore.
We can't have fun.
No fun allowed. This is not fun. This is work.
No gaming.
No gaming.
But,
we're too old for that.
Yeah,
we can only talk about it.
It was a popular rental title. Friends of mine had it. I don't own the game.
That's insane.
My N64 collection is not complete.
Since he said something that embarrassing,
I know, right?
I'm going to say something embarrassing.
Whoa.
Okay? You guys, just don't tell anybody what I'm about to say, okay? Shh. You guys can't repeat what I'm about to say. I don't like the multiplayer mode.
Well, that's okay. You do you.
I did. I played single player.
Right, that's fine.
Single player is great.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, the multiplayer, I just never really cared about it.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes that would show up in parties, and I was like, it was fun to watch people play it,
Yeah.
but I'm not very competitive, so I don't really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And I've remained that way. That's why I don't play games online or anything.
Yeah.
So
I don't do online gaming.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
when I play multiplayer, it's usually with the fam. You know, we're just hanging out.
Yeah. So with that, I just never enjoyed the multiplayer mode.
I get it. All right, next up, what do we got?
Well, the last on our list here, he also does not have.
I used to own this one, and I'll tell you why in a minute why I don't anymore.
Well, it's going to be pretty obvious when I say it. Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Great game.
So the story with, yes, it's a phenomenal game. So the story with that game is that Rare I got 3 Rare games on here. I didn't even realize. Rare and Nintendo.
Incredible company.
But basically all of them were Nintendo, or Rare was working exclusively with Nintendo at the time. Titles that couldn't appear on Sega hardware that you wish you had somehow magically in a fantasy world.
Yeah.
But yeah, Conker's Bad Fur Day, very late release N64 game, and was kind of presented as a child-friendly game when at the same time it openly admitted, like, this is not, it's a mature rated game, etc. And I remember renting it at Blockbuster back in the day, and it was kind of one of these things where my mom she was tricked by the box. Oh, it looks cutesy, whatever. Although my mom was not really the policing type on video games, I doubt she would have given it, she would have cared at all, but she was just like, whatever. Point is, she ran it for us, didn't care. And we were playing it, and like within a minute, Conker is like swearing and he's drunk, and we're like, this seems good. And then you realize like the gameplay is actually really fun. You get addicted to the story, and you're like, there hadn't been like a narrative platforming driven game like that with that much of a story. I don't think ever on the N64 that I recall.
Right.
Like it kind of took like Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 doesn't really have much of a story.
Yeah.
It basically is like
Save
Princess Peach, go save her.
Right.
But Mario doesn't really talk except woohoo, stuff like that. He doesn't do anything in that regard. Conker speaks.
Very story
And he
driven.
had, it's story driven, and it's also parody driven. Like, you got the Height of the Matrix parody, like Saving Private Ryan, all that stuff that's in there is just so great.
Really deep,
and
just a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on in that game, and it's also a game that you definitely felt you were getting your money's worth out of for time. Because your entertainment value, you were playing it, and it's like, dude, we've been playing this for like half a day. We're barely anywhere in it, and it doesn't feel like out of frustration you haven't gotten anywhere. It's like there's just so much content.
It's kind of a minor miracle the game exists.
I agree. It is. Yeah, I mean that in multiple ways, because you know, that game barely came out, and it's also like the heaviest N64 cartridge because the special chips they had to put in it, which is part of what makes it such an expensive title now.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, so it's just a phenomenal game. Absolutely loved it, still do. Admittedly, of the 5 on this list, it's the hardest one to go back to pick up and play because it's obviously you have to invest.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else, I mean, granted, you do have to invest in Super Mario World or Donkey Kong Country, but then you can just do a level here or two.
Yeah.
It's very fun. It's very, there's rules specifically.
Yeah.
Whereas that one is just almost like an early open world type of game.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't work exactly the same way. But it's a phenomenal game, and I highly recommend you, if you can, you should play it. There's other versions, actually. There was that remake for the original Xbox, which is nicer looking, but not as good of a game.
That's what I've heard. I haven't even played that one.
It's not bad. The problem was that I think that it would have been better, except when it was released, there was a big push on, like, maybe we should tone down the swearing.
Yeah.
Maybe we should tone down the tune. And they also decided actively not to do a straight-up remake, to the point where, if anybody who's played the original, you'll remember, like, right at the very beginning of the game, after you get Conker on his way, you get up to this gargoyle, and you basically have to time this one thing to smack him with a frying pan, and he, like, falls. So you do the exact same thing in the remake, and the guy doesn't fall, and then Conker will just straight up ask him, like, I thought this was the part where you were supposed to fall.
Oh.
And he goes like, just because it's a remake doesn't mean everything's the same.
That's kind of funny.
And it's like, it's funny, but then it's not actually the game you signed up for.
Right.
And so I feel like there was a no-win situation for them. Anyway, so the point is, that game exists, and you can play that. That's actually backwards compatible on the Xbox One, Xbox Series X, so it's very available. And Conker's Bad Fur Day, the original version, was in Rare Replay, which is also on the Xbox One and playable on the Series X. So actually, if you have either of those systems, that's the easiest way to play them.
And that Xbox, re-release or whatever, remake, sort of.
The OG one?
Yeah. It was cheap for a long time on the secondary market, but just in the last 2 or 3 years, it's gotten kind of expensive.
Because it's backwards compatible now.
Yeah.
That's mostly what that is. And it's still a good game. It's just not quite the original version.
Well, I discovered Conker's Bad Fur Day from hearing about it, how great it was, but also, how R-rated it is or whatever for the N64 and how odd that was. But I just remember it had a lot of buzz when it came out among, hardcore gamers. And I didn't get it right away, but then when GameStop was blowing them out, they had stacks and stacks of them for $9.99 each because it was released late in the life of the console, and there were just a lot they were trying to get rid of. I could have gone to GameStop and bought hundreds for $9.99 each. I could have driven all around, to every GameStop in Texas and just amassed a ton of them. And of course, I bought one copy just for myself to play. I didn't have, it wasn't considered valuable or anything. They were just dumping them. Little did anybody know they would be worth a lot of money later on. And my copy that I really liked, that I had in my collection, that I still like to play, once it hit $100, $120 on eBay, it was too much to resist. And I sold it, and I blamed my children on it. Because, when you got the kids...
That's a very mature father-like response.
You're paying for diapers and formula and all that stuff. I sold my copy of Conker's Bad Fur Day. And to this day, I regret it, because I would love to have that bad boy right over here in my collection.
So basically, you got cocky about the price.
Indeed, I did. And now it's worth quite a bit more than that. And I probably won't own a CIB copy because, it's kind of cost prohibitive at this point.
So you sold this when your kids were still in diapers?
I sold it a long time ago.
So here's what I think.
Perhaps they were a little older than that. It was just the fact that I was parenting and money was tight.
And how much you sell for?
Sold it for a little over $100 on eBay.
I think the way this video needs to end is that your son needs to hand you $100.
He absolutely should. He did sell me his PS4 for $100.
He sold you. He sold it to you.
Yeah, because he
so you gave him another $100.
I meant
now you're net 200 negative.
That was pretty recently though. So
no, he would have given you the PS2.
Yeah, he should have given me his PS4. He should have just given it to me.
PS4.
Because he upgraded to a PS5 recently to play the latest Call of Duty, And so he just didn't need his PS4 anymore, so he just sold it. I'm a late adopter. You know, I get systems when they're cheap. And so
Yeah,
I
he
bought
just
it
heard of
for
this thing called
$500.
ColecoVision. It's gonna be big.
Yeah, to me that's still, you know, to me the PS2 still seems modern. So, you know, what can I say? Anywho, I think we've probably been at it long enough here. Longer, that was a Floyd Swift, and we've been on here too long. Anyway, I think just the right amount. We covered one game every 5 minutes. It's a 25-minute video.
All right.
That's about right. So we'll sign off. So anyway, guys, let us know in the comments your favorite on this list, or just let us know your favorite, or let us know what Nintendo game of the Sega era that you wish could be on a Sega console, or that you wish would have been on a Sega console. You know, just let us know in the comments. Anyway, signing off with Adam Koralik. Again, thanks for being on the video. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for liking, subscribing, sharing, and all that good stuff. Talk to you in another video.